Welcome to the Exchange Podcast. I'm your host, Ari Hirschberg, Director of Digital Community and Engagement at Exchange Lab. We're recording this on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen people, and today we're going to do a deep dive into your questions from the Digital BC live stream, connecting you to the digital services you deserve. We're going to cover topics like how Indigenous people and consultations fit within the plan. Will the digital plan be compliant with digital accessibility and inclusion legislation, and how does the digital plan impact your day-to-day? Join me today as three people who are worked directly on creating the digital plan: Director of Digital Strategy, Amy Kirtay, Senior Policy Analyst, Sarah Poole, and Policy Analyst, Kirsten Anderson, share their thoughts. So without further ado, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Okay. What did you think this was going to be like before you started? Amy.
I'm not sure if I kind of knew what it was going to be like, but I'd worked on other strategic documents and, service plans and stuff. So I kind of had it in my head. It's like, okay, it'll take a couple months. We'll write a nice flashy report. It'll get posted online. That'll be it. But it's not been like that. It took a lot of work and it took a long time. And there are a lot of people that were involved in co-developing it and in a way that I hadn't been involved in a plan like that being developed before. And so I think I didn't really anticipate that. And just the length of time it took to develop what we did was long, but I think it was totally worth it. And we were able to do something really cool as a result.
Yeah, it's such a big thing for the BC government.
Yeah. And it's, when you're trying to do something that's going to impact so many people, it makes sense that it would have, a long roadway in terms of development and that you would want a lot of people involved in the development of something like that. So it takes a little bit longer, but, we learned so much out of it.
I think for myself, it definitely took longer than I anticipated, but I think I really thought the hard part was going to be the approval of and the engagement of connecting with all the BC public servants, as many as we could, and really try to hear from them what this needed to look like. And then how do you distill all that information down into something that's going to be meaningful? And that was hard, but it wasn't like the real part of actually writing it in a way that is, now that you have so many people interested in it, they all want to have a say of what it sounds like and what stories are shared. And, that kind of process of actually writing a document that gets across the finish line, I think was actually so much harder than the engagement piece. And I thought it would definitely be the other way around.
I love the before and after.
Yeah.
So what was it really like? You started talking a little bit about what it was really like. Any more thoughts on that?
For me, it's what it was really like, but it's still ongoing. We've gotten to the first stage of we've actually released a plan, and now we have to reach out and work with the ministries to figure out what is this going to mean for them and how are we really going to measure it and how are we going to be able to support it and allow it to keep growing so that it's not just a static document that we look back in 3 to 5 years and think whether we did it or not. We want to be able to see it kind of live and change over that time.
Yeah, even though it's out, which is great, it's really just the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to share more information about the new digital plan and where the BC government is going in that space?
Yeah, so that's the whole point of a new digital plan, is to provide a really overarching vision for government. And I think the biggest shift here is that government-wide direction towards connected services. So this is building services kind of with and for people so that we can do a better job of allowing them from the beginning to the end to have a kind of a smoother experience. With the digital plan, we have kind of a 4-mission approach. And I think with this, it kind of each mission is really quite interconnected to the other. So the first mission itself is that connected services that I was just explaining. The second mission is around digital trust. And this is about kind of delivering services that people can trust, that they can safely kind of access, and that they know are secure. So it's not just about having a digital identity, but it's that whole piece of digital trust that it encompasses. Obviously, to do a lot of that work, we need reliable and sustainable technology. This is kind of building the common components, being able to build things a little more efficiently, a little bit faster, using things that we already have access to. And then that fourth mission is a digitally equipped BC Public Service, which really underpins the whole digital plan. If it's not for the public service and having the skills that they need to be able to deliver on those services, we're not going to be able to get there. So it really is a very interconnected approach, but I think that it can really work kind of all together to be able to work towards that bigger vision.
Yeah, totally agree, Sarah. I think it also really shows we're trying to evolve the way that government has historically worked. We're really trying to kind of push the needle on that. And, I think there's been a lot of really great momentum of collaboration that we've seen over the last few years. And we want to keep that going and, use that kind of momentum to help us address some of the complex problems that are facing, our friends, colleagues in BC and in the communities across the province. And I think, this comes through in a lot of different ways. But I think there's a good opportunity for us to use this as a chance to kind of continue pushing and making these changes that are going to benefit everybody.
I have 2 follow-up questions. First for you, Sarah. Can you just define common components a little bit more, take it a little further?
I think Amy is probably better situated to answer that.
Sure. So common components are reusable pieces that can be used interchangeably to make up a piece of technology, so to speak, to deliver a great service. So often we see these things that are used quite frequently in technology or services, such as a payment, how you enter your payment information. That's a common thing that we often see in programs and services. So rather than rebuilding that ability time over time and spending all the money to redo it constantly, why don't we have one way of doing it that can be reused? We saw that common components worked quite well over the last few years when programs and services had to be stood up within hours or days. And by reusing components, we were able to build these services faster because we weren't starting from scratch each time. So they differentiate between common services and common platforms, but components are really those building blocks that can make up a service quite quickly.
Thanks. And so when you say it's done in days, so potentially without being a common component, it could be months and months and months instead of days.
Yeah. And often we see a lot of, repetition with some of these things because, our silos, unfortunately, lead us to maybe not sharing information across certain groups around what we're doing. And so, what we're doing in one space might be similar to another problem that's trying to be solved in another space, in another area of government. And if we're using common components, the citizen's also going to end up getting a similar experience at the end of the day. So it's not going to be, a different payment portal each time, or different login experience. We want some consistency there. It's going to make it easier for the citizen. And really, at the end of the day, it's going to make it easier for us to be able to respond quickly to the needs.
Wonderful. And then my second question is you're saying this new way of working. What was the old way of working compared to the new way of working? Are you able to explain the difference?
Yeah, it's funny. I love this term where it's we talk about digital government, but we don't talk about paper government. But it was a thing. And so I think we're kind of, there were these kind of more traditional ways of working where, we assumed we knew what the problem was and we would design a service based on an assumption for what the problem is. And sometimes we didn't actually hit the mark. And so now we're trying to take a step back and say, more modern ways of thinking about this are do I actually know the problem I'm trying to solve? Or are there ways that we could be doing things differently as opposed to this is just how we've always done it and this is the way we're doing it? I think we're seeing a bit of a shift too with more folks coming into the public service that have grown up with computers their whole lives and don't know any different. But then we also got quite a range in our public servants as well for some folks that have been here before we even had computers on our desks. So there's quite a range there. Yeah, so I think when we talk about new ways of working, it's taking some of the things that we're seeing in the private sector, especially around technology or just using our technology to make us more innovative and be able to respond more quickly to the needs of others. So I think that's a bit of a shift. And, I think we've maybe seen more of it in the private sector than we have in public, but I think it's a wave of change that's been coming for a while.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on the question?
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting that it's nice to have something that we're all able to rally around. So I think a lot of folks perhaps didn't see technology as part of their job or their role. And when we talk about connected services, at the end of the day, there's often a piece of technology or some digital aspect to that service delivery or program, even if it's being delivered by a human. And so I think one of the great things about what we've done here is just trying to make that connection for folks that technology is what we need in order to deliver. So I think it's been really cool to kind of have a plan that everyone can hopefully see themselves in and really understand about what we're trying to do in terms of creating those connected services, but the underlying foundation and pieces of technology and new ways of working that we have to have in place to actually get there, and really doing things with the citizen in mind and making sure that things that we're designing and what we're doing at the end of the day really is so that we can meet their needs. And I think, that isn't always an approach that governments sometimes take inadvertently. We sometimes design for ourselves because we are also citizens. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we are adapting to the needs, be it, someone who needs to get a service in person or someone who wants to access it on an app on their phone.
Thank you. How does the digital plan connect with our digital principles and the new digital code of practice? These are all new things for people.
So I can take this one. So the digital code of practice is something we're currently developing, an operational policy that we're developing in the open, really kind of shows how we buy, build, and design technology. So we released our digital principles, which were kind of guiding, principles for BC public servants. But we heard from a lot of folks that they needed more detail. When we talk about working in the open, what does that mean? That's kind of buzzwordy, jargony. So what we've tried to do is build on some of the great work that our counterparts in the UK have done with their technology code of practice and really kind of take some of those concepts and apply them here in BC. So our digital code of practice really kind of speaks to some of those things at a more nuanced level and helps folks that, like I was saying, that maybe didn't see technology as part of their role before, understand how they can apply some of these principles in their day-to-day. So I see our digital plan as kind of the vision and the overarching strategy document, but the digital code of practice provides some of that tangible, the insights that one might need to really kind of exemplify some of these things that we're talking about and really help drive some of the missions and some of the things that we've called out in the digital plan. And at the end of the day, we just really need to make sure that we're supporting our staff in understanding how to work, in a more modern way. And I think the digital code of practice will help us get there. So really seeing these two things connected quite a bit. And so, really appreciate all the feedback that we've gotten from folks, not only on the digital plan, but also the digital code of practice.
Oh, could you speak a little bit on the people first part too of the people working on it? How it's it's technology, but it's really people centered.
Yeah, definitely. So we really just want to make sure that as we develop policy in the open, that we're engaging with the folks that are actually going to use this. So we're trying to make sure that the folks that are co-designing it with us are actually going to be the ones that are using it at the end of the day and making sure that their voices have been heard in the development of this. Because, there's nothing worse than having something mandated on you that you don't really understand. And so we're really trying to make sure that this is not only designed for our public servants and our vendor partners and citizens, but that there's a chance for everyone to co-design it and have provide their input, because I think it's a really important thing to be able to have a say in how programs and services are delivered and designed for our citizens.
Thanks. How do Indigenous people and consultations, et cetera, fit within this digital plan?
So I think it's important to recognize that the government has been really working to expand access to high-speed internet across the province. They're aiming to have 100% of our communities connected to high-speed internet, I think, by 2027. So if we're going to provide internet access to people living in rural, remote communities, a lot of those communities are our Indigenous peoples that live out there. And we need to make sure that they also can then access services. Why build high-speed internet if they can't actually improve their accessibility to services? So I think with that in mind, we're not mandating any kind of consultation, but we are really calling out that we need to consider who it is that we're building services for. And so we want it to be built with people first, and, making sure that we are talking to those people that we're, thinking of those services for, and making sure that they're built in a way that can meet their needs. And so I think in consultation becomes a natural component of this type of development. I hope, if nothing else, people pause to think about how it is involved in their work. And, especially when it comes to digital services, they impact a lot of people. And you need to really take that kind of broader approach and make sure that you're not leaving anybody behind in order to develop a service.
Few things I've heard a few times or over and over again is how we're meeting people's needs. We're meeting, like, whether it be people outside of government, people who we work with in government, vendors. It seems to be really people centric.
Mm-hmm. And even for people in government, we can, by developing digital services, we can improve the people that are delivering those services. We can make it easier for them to understand what it is that they need to do. We can, get rid of some of the archaic filing systems and thousands of spreadsheets that we have in many of our areas, and streamline that information and make it easier for them to do their job well. So, when we're thinking about people and who those users might be, there's a broad range of people that need to be thought of.
I think it's interesting too. We all know someone, be it a family member or whoever, who has struggled with accessing a service. And at the end of the day, like, we have to think about, our friends and family that struggle with some of these things too, because they're not intuitive, or even ourselves. And there's just such a range of abilities now when it comes to digital and technology that we're designing for people that have a wide range of, knowledge in this space. And that can make it really challenging because you're trying to meet a variety of needs. And so I think it just really highlights the importance of considering everybody in that process, because they're all going to have differing needs and differing abilities in how they want to access those services.
Yeah.
I was just going to say also, thinking back to alignment with the digital principles, the idea that, we should be consulting with users, which include Indigenous peoples. And another one of the principles is emphasis on cultural awareness and respect and delivering value for users. So that all, loops around together. I just wanted to add that.
Will the digital plan set and provide the framework for digital accessibility inclusion for compliance to the recent Legislation Act?
So the digital plan itself isn't there to set the framework for digital accessibility and inclusion, but it is there to provide direction for government to go in making sure that that is where and how we're going. So specifically in respect to accessibility and inclusion, like Citizen Services itself has really committed to developing web content standards and guidance and training, publishing tools. There's beginning to be a lot of tools that people can access through a variety of manners, and all of which provide that guidance and some of those frameworks around accessibility and inclusion. Another aspect of accessibility is continued access to services for people who might choose to go in person or who might not be able to access those services online or digitally. In Mission 1, particularly, the digital plan calls upon ministries to make sure that they're not just thinking about digital services, but how to deliver multi-channel services so that people can access it how they want, when they need it. And even such as, like, if they start online, that they should be able to transfer to in-person or telephone services.
Thank you. How can I use the digital plan and these principles in my day-to-day work as a public servant?
That's a great question. When we developed the digital plan, we had a lot of input and co-designed a lot of the content from public servants across different ministries and for varied roles. We talked to folks from 18 different ministries at all different levels within government. And so the fourth mission in particular is focused on digitally equipped public service. And that includes specific calls to support public servants in accessing and acquiring those modern digital skills that they need in the digital age. Because digital is now part of delivering every program and service in government, from the front line to the back office. So it's not just the IT departments or the IMBs, the information management branches. It's service delivery, anyone who's involved in service delivery, which is all of us. That's why we're here. So digital services might be developed by product teams, but it's often the business or program area managing the delivery of those services. And there's also services that we're developing for each other within government that can improve the experience of staff as well as people accessing, as well as the citizens. And the digital plan recognized that we all need access to those tools, training, and support. Like, for example, the Digital Academy is expanding their course offerings so that employees can develop the literacy and skills they need. They can sign up for like UX courses, or folks that are just starting out in this space and they want to learn more. They should be able to be afforded the time and the space to do that by their leadership.
So the UX, user experience, and Agile, and Scrum Master and Product Owner, these are all starting off at a real introductory level for anyone.
Exactly.
Okay. Anyone have any final thoughts?
I think my final thoughts are just that, this is a major step in the process to be able to launch the digital plan. But the next piece for us is really making sure that we support the ministries, because we recognize that all the ministries are at their own, they're on their own journey. They all have their own services and that they have to deliver. And the help that they need is going to look different from ministry to ministry. And we want to figure out, how can we best support that? What does that look like for them? And so for us, I think, launching it is just the beginning. And as you kind of mentioned, we need to make sure that we continue on with the work so that we can implement it as best as possible.
I think one of my final thoughts, is just like, we've been so fortunate to have other jurisdictions that have done some amazing work in this space that we've been able to look to and draw inspiration from, but then take a lot of that and think about it in our BC Gov context and what does it mean for us? And to Sarah's point, I think, we've been working on this plan for a little bit. It's great to now have it finally published, and now it's how do we bring it to life? How do we really make it tangible now? And I think that's a really fun challenge that we're going to have over the next X number of months, years, but I think it's also something that can set the foundation for years to come. And I think, as we continue, maybe there's other jurisdictions that look to us to see how can we be doing this differently? And I hope it just starts to open that conversation among other levels of government and other jurisdictions around, how can we best serve the citizen in this digital and modern age? I think we're often solving similar problems. So how can we learn from one another and make it real?
I think I would add that I'm feeling optimistic about what's coming next. And when we talk to all those folks across government, we heard a lot of challenges, and some of them were common. But we also heard a lot of passion and people who were really dedicated to solving those problems. And it really sounds cheesy, but it was really inspiring, actually, and made me feel kind of hopeful about what we can do together.
That's really exciting. I've been in government for a few years now too, and I'm continually amazed how passionate many people I run into about this work, working for citizens and just improving the work. Pretty exciting. So thanks again, Amy, Sarah, and Kirsten, for taking time to share your thoughts. The listeners, hope you enjoyed this episode, connecting you to the digital services you deserve. You can connect with me at ari.hirschberg@gov.bc.ca or click the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening.